Okay, I would like to say hello. I'm Ashley. I'm your housing service advocate for the city of Albany. Our new Department of Neighborhood and Community Services. Part of my job is to help any resident, any landlord, property manager, developer, just anyone that's having a housing concern. You can reach out to me and I will help try to help with your housing concern, just depending on what it is. Um, I'm basically a gateway to our new housing team. A part of our team is Amanda, and she is our fair housing officer. So she helps people with discrimination if anyone they feel like they are being discriminated for with their landlords, property managers. She is the one you will speak to, and she will go along her process as far as what she does when it comes down to discrimination. Part of my job, as far as being the service advocate, is to help educate folks on housing. So we pick several topics throughout some months to see what are the main concerns, and eviction and legal processes is one of the top things that we constantly are hearing people are struggling with right now. So this series, this today's series is dedicated to that. Um, and I would like to also introduce Robert. And you want to introduce, or you want me to introduce?
Hmm? Okay, I'm Robert Romaker. I'm a managing attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Northeast New York. I supervise attorneys and paralegals that handle housing matters, mostly evictions, including in the city of Albany.
Nice. Nice. And we are here today just to educate you a little bit more about eviction. So I'm gonna start. What I am gonna say is that, well, if you have any questions, you can definitely interrupt me with your question, and I'll be happy to answer you. But if it does get busy and we have a lot of comments, we might just ask that at the end to just hold them off until the end of the session, just so that everyone can have the opportunity to have the right enough time to speak on their housing concern. Another disclaimer too is Robert is here from legal aid, but at this point in time, he cannot provide any legal advice for a specific case. Um, but let's say if you are having a housing struggle, I mean, you can definitely talk to us in the back and we'll be able to connect you to the right folks. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna start our session about housing court. So as you can see, housing court is here located in City Hall. And in Albany, all housing court cases take place on the second floor of Albany City Court District. Hello. These are, yes, I'm Ashley. Nice, nice. So some of the things that you can go to court and you can file a claim for is for an eviction, small claims, rent, security deposits. Um, I've seen many things in city court, from Walmart, people filing claims against Walmart, to everything up under the sun, I would say. So you can definitely file any type of small claims or just any type of formal court at Albany City Courthouse. Codes is another court. Like, if you are experiencing anything with codes, if they send you to court, they also send you to the same courtroom. Okay, so that's just some of the things that go on in that courtroom. If you don't know how it looks, this is how it looks. And it's 24 Eagle Street, and it's the room 209. You can contact them by phone, or if not, you can always email them, and they are open from 9 to 4. Okay. Some general tips when appearing in court is, one, you always want to arrive early. You want to plan to be there at least 30 minutes before your scheduled court hearing, just because there's security detail in City Hall. And not only that, there could be an opportunity where you are meeting with someone like a United Tenants representative, or maybe someone is in the court that's providing free legal representation. This might be the opportunity where you can speak to them. This also might give you the opportunity for you to speak to your landlord as far as trying to um, manage basically the session before even going into the courtroom. Coming down to an agreement. This might be the time too where arriving early might just benefit you. You want to be patient. I know here in Albany, everyone's court date is scheduled at 9 a.m. And how it usually goes in court is that it's by the name, or I guess the way that they get the cases. So you might think it's 9 a.m. for you, but in reality, you could possibly be seen at 11 o'clock in the morning. So just a tip to just, if you do attend court, just keep your afternoon or your morning open. What to wear to court? Of course, I'm not going to tell you what to wear, but I'm going to tell you at least to just be appropriate. I wouldn't wear any t-shirts that saying like anything offensive towards the judge or towards law enforcement. Just keep it clean and casual, I would say. What to do? Well, when the judge enters, I think it's just etiquette. Everyone will stand up. Depending on the judge, he might tell you to stay seated. But of course, you just want to always address the judge as your honor or judge. Okay. You want to stay calm and speak clear. When it's your turn to speak calmly and clear, it's your time to definitely explain your situation. You want to avoid sharing any unnecessary details or talking about unrelated issues. And the only reason why I say that is because the judge is really just wants to know the information and the facts as to what's going on. Um, and again, you want to address the judge and not your landlord. Some of these tips might be very basic, but a lot of people really just don't know these little tips like this. Some people are going to court. It may be eviction, might be their first time even going to court. So these helpful tips will basically make you successful in court. You want to tell the truth in court. Of course, lying in court is perjury. And it's against the law. So you just want to tell your truth as far as what's going on with the situation. You don't want to interrupt your landlord or say anything when it's their time to speak. Or you don't also want to interrupt the judge as well when they're speaking. Okay. What to do in the eviction process. So in reality, this map is if it's like a normal lifestyle. This is how the notices and how basically the whole eviction process will go. Depending on the cases, depending on the area, a lot of people tend to always go, like you might get an illegal eviction note, or some landlords might just go, they might go all the way down to the bottom without even going through all the other steps that they need to. But this is why I wanted to show you, because this is the whole process. Okay. So one, you're gonna get an eviction notice. There's different types of eviction notice. There's demand for rent. And demand for rent is basically a notice saying like, hey, you owe $1,000 and it needs to be paid by September 24th. It's gonna be a warning letter like that. If it's a non-payment form, or if they're taking you to court because of a lease violation, it is called notice secure. So a lot of the terms in this slide are the legal terms of what the letters are called. So note to cure is just anything, is basically anything towards the lease. So if you're making a lot of noise, if they believe the landlord, you have an unsafe situation, they're gonna note it on the letter as note to cure. Then you may get a notice of termination. Your landlord has to give you a 30, 60, 90-day notice. 30 days is if you lived in the apartment less than 1 year. The 60-day notice is if you've been staying in an apartment basically 1 to 2 years. The 90-day notice is if you've been in the apartment more than 2 years. So if they are giving you, and the notice of termination will come in if like a lease is expiring. So if your lease is supposed to expire October 31st, you just moved into an apartment within a year, they don't want to renew the lease, they should be giving you a 30-day notice. Okay? Does anyone have any questions?
What if you live in the building 6 years?
It should still.
I think it probably,
Yeah, it's just-
I think it probably
depends.
reboots if you're in a different unit.
It does, right?
Yeah, if you're in a different unit, that's a new tenancy. That would be the time period for the notice. Right, but if it's a
Right.
different unit, it's a different tenancy, maybe a different rent.
Might be different, bigger size. It depends on if you got now, if you went from a 1 bedroom to a 2 bedroom. Yeah. Really? We could talk more about
Yeah,
it.
it restarts, I think. Good question. I never.
Yeah, that was a good question too, now that I
But it
say that.
restarts.
But I think some landlords, some might not make, yeah, like some might not make that a big deal. They might still consider it the 6 years because they known you for that long. But I think the actual it would affect it if it is a different unit, different rent. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if you guys were able to hear it, but the question was, what happens if you move into a new apartment but you stay in the same residency for like 6 years? And again, we just believe that it depends on the type of, we would think, yes, that it would expire once you moved into the new apartment just because of size. It can be that could be 2 rooms. You can go in from 1 bedroom into a studio. Some landlords might really stick it to that rule, but some might just consider it all the same time. Okay, so a petition for eviction. If the problem is not resolved, the landlord may serve the tenant with a document called a petition. This explains why the tenant is being evicted and it sets a court date. What's very important about this is that a lot of people confuse the notices with the petition. How you know it's an actual petition is if there's really a court date and it's some court paperwork or it was delivered by like a certified mail. You should just know that that form is just, it means something different. If you do receive this form, right? Like if you do receive the petition to set a court date, this is the time period where you can now start reaching out and looking for community providers to come help with the situation. So for example, if you are possibly about to get evicted for back rent, this is the time, the moment that you get this petition with a court date, this is where you are contacting United Tenants, Legal Aid, or it could be a possibility that you may have to go to DSS to get emergency assistance. This is when you start the process.
If not earlier.
Yeah, if not earlier.
If not earlier.
If you can earlier. But I always say that too, this is the time because a lot of other community providers, they required the DSS denial letter. So this is why I'm just like, it's probably the time where you do start going to DSS and getting that letter or not. In the back or in the packet that you have with you, those community providers are in your packet. So you have all the contact and numbers as far as the agencies that help with back rent, legal representation, and more.
Something else I was gonna say for Albany City Court. Yeah, make sure you go to the one on Eagle Street, because we have clients a lot that will go to the one on Morton Street.
Which is the
which is
criminal
the
court.
Criminal court.
Yeah,
And they'll
yeah.
end up there and they'll be like, where are you? They're waiting and they're at the wrong place. So
Yeah.
You gotta go to the civil court for evictions on Eagle Street, not to the court on
Mhm.
Morton Street.
All right, so now that you get the petition, now you got a court date. Now it's saying, hey, now is the court date, your initial, and this is called the initial appearance. This is where the judge is briefly going to hear both sides of the story. If the landlord and tenant cannot settle at this point in time, the judge is going to set for an eviction trial date. This is also the time period where you may, depending on time, you may have someone that can legally represent you. And let's say at this point in time, you go to the initial appearance and you don't have anyone that legally can represent you, you can, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, you can ask for another court date just because you're trying to get legal representation or you're trying to get help from a community provider. Ooh, I'm sorry. Okay. So again, I would just say, just don't panic. This is just the first time and they're listening out to your case. 9 times out of 10, the judges here in Albany, they are not trying to make they're not trying to make the decision themselves. They really want you and your landlord to figure it out. They really do. So this might, the initial appearance, that's what it's really about. The judge just wants to make sure that is it something that they can agree on or settle within themselves, or if they really have to make that decision. You may have some other hearing or court dates. course, you always want to pay attention to that. But now we at the eviction trial. And what happens now at the eviction trial? Now both tenants, the tenant and the landlord, have the opportunity to make their case. This is where both parties can bring witnesses and documents. This is basically your time to definitely talk on any housing concern that you have, and for the landlord also to express as to why they want to terminate the lease or why they want their money. Most of the time, landlords are assisted by an attorney in court. Technically, tenants in New York do not have the right to counsel, and what that means is that the judge is not going to assign you a public defender or assign you any legal representation. In civil court, they're not going to do that. You can definitely bring someone with you, but it's not appointed to you. Okay, that's the major difference. If you wish to have legal representation, again, legal aid, I would highly suggest contacting legal aid because yes, they do provide the service to be able to represent you in court. The county and the city is also expanding more, and I think it's just becoming more of a national problem where a lot of money is being funded to agencies just to provide the legal representation. So hopefully in time you'll see more and possibly people that are applying for this funding to help and be that representation in court. Okay. The number is there for legal aid, but don't worry, in your packets and just the information, you'll have all the information that you need. Okay. Now, so you guys went to trial, you guys are talking. And unfortunately, now we at the point in time where now there is a warrant now out for for the eviction. The legal term for that is an eviction judgment if the tenant loses. After an eviction judgment is given, the landlord will need to ask the court for a warrant to carry out the eviction. And that should be no sooner than 14 days after the judgment. It must be signed by a judge and it must be given to Albany County Sheriff's Department for service. A landlord cannot evict a tenant without a warrant, even if they receive the judgment in court.
Just to clarify, I mean, usually the judgment and the warrant are issued at the same time,
Oh, they okay.
but the 14-day clock starts ticking after you get served with the warrant.
Right.
So it might not be 14 days from when you're in court.
Right.
Usually they get it and then it has to go to the sheriff, and then the sheriff has to
do
serve it, and they serve all around the county. So it could be a few days or a week. And then once you get that warrant, then the 14 days starts. It's 14 calendar days. So
yes. The number one thing I wanted to say here is just that I think all of us, when I say by that is this session, community providers, we all are trying to prevent this. We all are trying to prevent anyone from having to be evicted out of the apartment. We understand there's a lot of housing concerns, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to help people and try to see if we either can shift them to somewhere, not shift them, but they get them a better set apartment, versus anyone just being evicted and being kicked out of a home. There's a lot with that comes behind the eviction, and more and more people are just learning that. So this is why we host sessions like this, to just help you prevent this. But if you do have to experience it and unfortunately you do get the warrant for eviction, just know there still is help at this point in time. Okay, you shouldn't be by yourself or be dealing with this by yourself. You have all of our information. That's literally what our job is to help you. If you are able to pay back your rent, you should inform your landlord. If the landlord refuses to cancel the eviction warrant and you have the information to present to the judge, you should go to court and speak with the court staff about filing an order to show cause to ask for a new court date. But Robert, is there anything else that someone can do at this point in time?
Well, one thing I would say is that if you are able to pay the back rent, you should get some sort of written commitment from your landlord that they're going to cancel the eviction warrant. Yeah. Because you don't want to pay the money over and then have them give you a verbal promise that for some reason they don't keep. Right. And then you paid all the money and you get evicted, which is obviously like the double whammy that you don't want. If you miss the court date, or you have paid or you can pay, or there's additional information you want to present, you can go and file an order to show cause, which is just asking the court to reopen the case and give you another court date. Sometimes the judge will sign that, and sometimes they won't. If there's a default that you didn't go to court or you were late or whatever, you have to explain that to the court in there, and there has to be basically a good reason. It gets a little tricky there because courts often require that, but really, if you're able to show that you had a good reason and you have or even if it's not a default situation, if you have some reason for them to reopen the case, like you have the money now because you got help from an agency or whatever, you came up with the money somehow. Or if they're, you went and talked to a lawyer and the lawyer said, well, you had all these defenses that you could have raised, then you can put that in there and ask the judge, I've gotten legal counsel now and I understand I have these defenses, and you can list them and you can submit it to the court and ask the judge to look at it. If they sign it, they'll set a new hearing. And then you have to go there and basically establish that you should have the warrant and judgment set aside, and then kind of, get you back to square one to try to, I guess, prevail on the second occasion.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Let's go to the Albany.
Yes.
Court?
Yes.
Same place.
Yeah,
and then what happens is that if the judge signs it, then they require the person who files it, which is usually the tenant, has to find somebody who is not a party to the action to serve it on the landlord or the lawyer. And then somebody has to serve it on the sheriff too, because obviously if the warrant's been served and the clock's ticking, somebody's got to get that order to the sheriff to stop them from executing the eviction at the end of the 14 days. So if you get it signed, you have to find somebody that will serve it on the landlord. Somebody who's not a party to the action, who's over the age of 18, a friend, relative, neighbor. It just can't be the tenant themselves. And there are all kinds of bases for order to show cause. It's probably beyond the scope of this, but there's all kinds of different defenses that you can raise, when they're applicable in an eviction case.
I see that we missing, the PowerPoint is not up to date, but if you see your slides there, the next slide that's coming up is how to stop an illegal eviction. So our folks that are on Zoom, you might not see this slide on there, but I do wanna, you'll hear me talk about this, okay? The next slide is how to stop an illegal eviction, like what it looks like. If you haven't been given a court date, if there is not a judge or no legal representation, if a landlord changes the locks without informing you, if there's no trial or there's a harassment from the landlord, 9 times out of 10, that's probably an illegal eviction. So for example, an example of that can be, hey, I need you out by the end of October. If you're getting a text message or some type of notice that states something like that, that is basically an illegal eviction. Remember, all evictions you have to go to court. And you just have to fight the case. So if you are receiving a text message or a letter like that, please contact. I would say definitely log that, document that. What if it's a text message, if it's an email, save it. Because that is the proof as far as the documentation, which is showing that your landlord is trying to basically take you out of the apartment without going through the actual eviction process.
Well, and one of the most frequent questions we have is, if you get a 14-day notice as you're behind on your rent, the 14 days expires, do I have to move now? And like Ashley said, no, you don't, because they still have to take you to court.
Yes.
If they give you notice or don't give you notice and do anything but take you to court, change the locks, shut your electric or water off, take your stuff and throw it out in the yard. I mean, I've seen all these things happen. Those are all illegal evictions. Call the police. It's actually a crime to do that in New York State now. So the police should at least make the landlord reverse what they've done, whether it be to put a new lock on or to restore the utilities or whatever. And if it gets really bad, I mean, really the landlord should be, criminal charges should be filed. It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah. And not only that, for documentation for when, if you do have to go to court, I always say if a police officer does come, please try to get an incident number or report number. If they say they can't give you one or they don't have it at the moment, I would still call probably the next day, just informing them that you just need some type of documentation stating that you contacted the police and the police made some type of report or written statement as to what was going on. That will also be documentation and stuff that you would bring to court, if you need to basically show cause. The next slide is, what if my lease expires? So I'm going to briefly speak on this just because we still don't have a lot of information about this law, but under here within Albany, there's the good cause eviction law, which most tenants can be only evicted for certain situations, good causes. That's why it's called good cause. These are some of the things listed that can possibly be considered good cause and could be considered to start basically the eviction process. Main ones you can focus on is the tenant is using their unit for illegal purposes. The tenant is refusing the landlord to come into the unit. The landlord wishes to stop using the building for residential purposes. The tenant is showing us, I might be saying it wrong. Negligence, I never can say it right, but yes, my Spanish doesn't let me do it. It interferes with comfort and safety of the landlord or any other tenant. So let's say if there's like a conflict outside and it has become very unsafe, that could be possibly a reason why the landlord could now start the eviction process.
Or non-payment of rent.
Yeah, or non-payment of
Obviously,
rent.
it's-
Any expired lease is not good cause, but tenants may face eviction if they refuse to sign a new lease agreement. The number one thing also is just to remember about the good cause law is that it's not rent control. It is not rent control. This is not the law that can help with the rent control. This is literally just speaking about good cause and for evictions. The city later on will provide more information about this and you'll probably see it on our websites, but this is just a little gist that I got of it, and just wanted to share this with you guys. Okay.
You have a question?
Yeah.
It does.
Mhm.
It
Mhm,
does.
mhm.
It does. And I don't,
It's very vague and I don't even, yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You might be thinking of late fees. I mean, late fees are limited to 5%. I know statewide.
Yeah. 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 Again, this is something very brand new that we all are still learning.
Well, the other
So
thing
we
that's
are- yeah.
confusing is that Albany had a good cause ordinance that got challenged by a landlord and it was struck down.
Mhm.
And so that's gone. And then the state passed this good cause
This one.
eviction that only applies if cities or municipalities opt in.
Mhm, and we opted
So
in.
there was a good cause, that was an ordinance that might be what you're thinking of, that's not at play anymore. And then there's this one because Albany opted in at the beginning of July.
That one in 2019 set an amount over which you need to have justification. So if you want to go with 5% increase, you have to have justification in investment.
Right, something, right, you renovated the apartment, yeah, yeah, yeah. That might be in effect,
Yeah, I don't know.
but being that we opted into it, I know, like, for example, I know we don't have like much control of that. That's literally us opting into what the state is putting out. Yeah. And we the first city to opt into it. Like Albany was the first city to opt into it. Yeah.
And it's in fact.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
No disagreement there.
Yeah. But the more information that we do get and the more information that all of us are learning more about this, I would definitely share that with folks. Just because this information, of course, is very important. Of course, they might think that, on a website or something you could find it, but not everyone can get it that way. And not everyone understands legal language. It's like a whole nother dictionary. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I'm definitely in time going forward, I would definitely try to break it down as much as I can, as much more information that I'm learning about it, and break it down and so that I can pass it along to the next folks. Yeah. No, no, no. No, no. Yeah. 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 No, yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. As many more information, new stuff comes up, I'm gonna try to do these series or send them out to folks. That's why in the back I asked for everyone's email by if you could provide it for me, because that's just the fastest way I can share more information to folks as to what's going on, what new housing services are around, where the funding is. I'm just quicker with the email just because I move so fast a lot. All right, so
Ashley, we
uh-huh.
just have one question in the chat about good
Okay.
cause.
Let me.
We have a whole section on just good cause.
Yeah, we might, it could be lead that we might have to do like a whole series, probably just
Especially as-
speaking on good cause. Yeah, just to clarify, are you saying that a landlord, the question is, are you saying that a landlord cannot just refuse to renew a lease if the tenant does not want to leave unless the landlord can show good cause?
That's right.
Yes.
So what we're saying,
That's not what
that's what the law
yes,
says.
that's not what we saying, but the law does state that.
Just the message.
Yes, John. Okay. First question, what do I do if I get an eviction notice? Well, the common responses to an eviction notice is the 3 Fs, which is flight. You either go to court and contest the eviction. So this is you fighting. Flight, which is you get the notice and you leave the unit. This is known as a self-eviction. Or you may freeze, which is you don't do anything, you ignore the court dates and you just wait to get evicted. These are some of the responses. I think the most common response is a lot of people tend to leave the unit when they receive this message. And again, I would please do not leave. You do not have to leave at that point in time. I just know a lot of people that just
Well, it
automatically
might be
go.
a good idea,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
found
just
a place
depends.
that's bigger and
Better.
cheaper,
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't have to leave.
You don't have to
You're
leave at that
required
point
to.
in time. If you receive an eviction notice, the worst you can do is nothing. That is the worst thing you can do, is just not appear to anything, not fight for anything. So this is why it's important for you to pay attention to any deadlines or any court dates. You want to write them down, put them in a calendar, set a reminder on your phone. If you have an Alexa in the house, just set her. She'll be able to give you the reminder of your court date. But going to court and fighting your cases is the only way that you can basically just fight for yours. If you have the legal right to stay in your unit until you have the right, you've received an eviction judgment and a signed warrant. Again, if you do get this notice, this is where you see legal aid. Please start contacting legal aid and please start reaching out to your community providers that can provide that help for you.
Right, and to clarify, they come twice. They serve you with the warrant and then they can come back no sooner than 14 days to execute the warrant, which is the time when they make everybody
Right.
leave.
Right.
So they have to come twice.
They have to
serve
come
you the
twice.
warrant. Once you get that warrant, you've got 14 days at least. You don't really know when they're going to come back, but it shouldn't be any sooner than 2 weeks. I think they're pretty good
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. They did mention, which before, that you could call them. They're not going to tell you when they're going out, but you can call them and see if your name is listed anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't tell us, they don't tell us when they're gonna go out too,
No.
because I think there have been instances across the country. I think they're pretty rare, but they have happened where, where police officers get ambushed.
Yeah.
By people in this situation because they know they're coming. So they're pretty tight-lipped with us. They'll tell the landlords and their attorneys. Sometimes they'll tell us.
Yeah.
It's hard to find out, but I think you can
You can call
find
them.
out if they've got a warrant for you that
Yeah.
they're planning to serve. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. Um. All right. Number two is I just received a notice. How soon can I be evicted? Under normal circumstances, the eviction process can move fairly quickly. Most cases, the court calendar is within 2 to 3 weeks. If you show up to court and you ask for, let's say, an adjournment, that's the legal term of it, as far as asking for an additional. Oh, you guys can't see that.
Did you hit the wrong button or something?
No. Okay, we just having difficulties over here, right? Everything's on, right?
There you are.
Mhm. Just wanna.
So you're showing
Mhm.
FAQ3 up here.
See that, right? Can you guys see this? Libsy, are you able to see my screen?
I can see the PowerPoint. It's just not full screen.
Seems like when you just are idle, everything stops here. Can you see this now? Um,
I don't, yeah, now the PowerPoint is down.
Now?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Right. 1, 3. If you have will I have an attorney in court? Tenants, again, you do not have, the court is not going to assign you any legal representation. That means you have to seek your own. Again, free legal assistance is with legal aid. And of course, there's another service which is called Legal Hand, and they are volunteers. They're not lawyers, but they are volunteers, and they can provide some type of advice. Or if they believe that you need an attorney, they can also make referrals. In your packet, there's a housing service form that I created. It says, sorry, hey, you missed me on the top. The third section on that form has just some lawyers that are able to as well do some they are able to help tenants and be that legal representation. Okay. Number 4, do I have to go to court? Should I go to court legally? You are not required to attend court in the civil case, but you will not be subject to arrest for failing to appear. But um, you basically just need to appear to court. It's the best way.
If you don't go, you lose.
Yeah, if you don't go, it's you lost. And you can tell me it can go either way too, right? If the landlord doesn't appear as well.
Depending on the court, but it's
Yeah.
less likely to happen that way.
Yeah.
Albany City Court, it might do that, but most courts will adjourn it if a landlord doesn't show up.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I see that.
Especially if the tenant's there, it could go either way, but with tenants, if you don't show up, they usually don't adjourn it, they usually just issue a
They
default,
just issue.
especially if the landlord's there. I have seen them when neither shows up, then they'll throw it out.
Yeah, I seen
But
that too.
if the tenant doesn't come there and the landlord or their lawyer or both are there, it's usually a default judgment against the
Yeah.
tenant, and then you get into the warrant, and
Yeah, that's when the process
yeah, it goes
speeds.
forward.
Yeah.
Down that same route.
Is it true that my landlord cannot evict me if the unit has no ROP? Generally, the Albany City Court judges, they do not ask if the property has an active ROP. They usually expect the tenants to know this or make that argument in court. If you want to know if your apartment has an active ROP, you can definitely reach out to our buildings and regulatory compliance, which is AKA our codes department. You can also go to our website. There's a self portal as well, that way you can type in the address and you can see if there's an active ROP. Or if not, you can just contact me and I can probably tell you whether if the apartment has an ROP or not. Most how it's supposed to be. So ROPs is a city code mandate. Um, a part of that mandate is that the ROP needs to be visual. So if your unit, you should like the landlord should post it somewhere where you can see that they do have a ROP permit, and it states like which apartments is okay.
Another reason to go to court, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't go to court, even if there's no ROP, like Ashley said, the judge won't raise that on her own.
You got to bring that
You
court.
have to bring that up.
Yep. And a ROP is basically just is an inspection that the code department does, the inspectors do, to just make sure that the unit is safe and secure and habitable for someone, for that unit to be rented out to someone. Every day I run into stories all the time with people who move into just apartments, and there's a lot of code violations. I would say probably 75% of the time there's no active ROP. And usually I'm like informing someone, hey, there's no ROP there. Maybe like this would be something that you can definitely fight in court. And 9 times out of 10, they don't know what an ROP is. So this is why within our last session, we had it with the codes department. We just focus on ROPs, but we can always just do a housing session on ROP specifically for tenants and specifically for landlords too. Because I believe so many landlords they don't know as well. A lot of people just really just don't know that you have to get a permit. I think that
You can ask for it, but I don't think you'll get it because they have this thing called use and occupancy, which is if you live there and you used and occupied the unit, then you're still required to pay use and occupancy. They don't call it rent because they don't really call it rent when there's no ROP, which is stands for residential occupancy permit. And usually in Albany City Court, if you go there and argue that, then they will throw the case
they
out.
usually throw it out. Yeah, because it's city code.
It's like about the best argument you can have in the city of Albany, and it's actually statewide now.
Is it?
But most courts don't recognize. Albany City does.
Yeah.
A lot of other courts around here don't recognize it. Actually, we've had people in other courts saying this isn't Albany, and then we have to say it's not just in Albany anymore. It's state.
It's a state thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's it's on our list of things to kind of keep pushing.
I always say if there's someone just doesn't have an ROP, you basically got the case 75%. Because you're supposed to have it.
It can get complicated though,
It can,
because
yeah.
sometimes landlords will find out from their lawyer like 2 days before court that you have to have an ROP, and then they'll scramble and get one, and the tenant will say there's no ROP. And then the landlord will hold it up and it's like, and then does that count because it was after the case was filed? But before the case, so it does get complicated sometimes. Most of the time, it's just there's no ROP. Is that true? There's no ROP. Case gets thrown out, and then they have to start all over again.
We're gonna hold another session that's just like the FYIs of like social media, because I know a lot of folks some people are just trying to look for a house. They're not really paying attention to any of that. They just want somewhere to be at. But I will always say, not always say, but 75% of Facebook marketplaces homes, they usually don't have ROP. Okay.
Actually, just 2 questions in the chat. One, what would no ROP have to do with the cause of eviction?
It only applies in non-payment of rent cases. So if you don't have an ROP and it's not a non-payment rent case, it's not gonna help.
Right.
So that's what it has to do, is you're not as this young lady said, you're not permitted to, you're not really supposed to collect rent, and you certainly can't evict for not paying rent if you don't have the ROP. If
Okay.
it's a credit case and it's not non-payment, then the ROP doesn't really come into play.
Okay. And then the second question, which I think you partially answered, is it illegal for landlords to evict a tenant if they don't have an ROP in place?
Depends on.
It depends, yeah.
What, evict them for what?
Yeah, why would
That
someone
was my
evict?
question. If it's for
Yeah.
non-payment, they can't do it. If it's for something else, the ROP is not an impediment. So
Okay.
that's a really good question.
That is a good question.
I don't know.
No, technically, if you are renting a room in a
I
house,
don't
that
think
is
so.
illegal.
That's a good
Yeah,
question, because you're right, a lot of laws do exempt, like owner occupied or. Right.
no, I think with the city code,
Yeah, I think it's universal, but I don't know 100%.
I know the city code here, it still requires it. It's still any unit, big or small.
And not yet that has significant things wrong with it, that would take it, you know, some major work to get an ROP. What happens then?
Well, it never should have been rented out in the first place, but I guess we're
Yeah.
getting to that point in your hypothetical. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, all kind of things can happen. I mean, you know, the landlord could put the tenant in another unit. I suppose while the repairs are done. But I think that's just really, that's a tough spot for everybody. I don't know if I've ever heard of that happening before.
I know you can definitely call codes and they'll definitely work with you. I've seen them do that as far as trying to work with the landlord or just working with the situation to see what happens. Cool, yeah. And 9 times out of 10, like something I would do is just like, I might send like a friendly letter saying, hey, like we just see that only if like, and I only ask too if the tenant wants me to send this letter. Like I'll ask them beforehand. They say, yeah, I don't mind sending a letter. It's usually just a friendly letter like, hey, we see that you don't have a ROP, but if you want some more information about it, like here goes the information. You can always come in and talk to me about it. Versus like, hey, you don't got a ROP, like this is, like the police. Yeah. Yes. But again, if that's another topic that we would like to learn more about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me about that. I can always call in too as well, have the codes department come in and even speak more about it if that's the case.
Did we answer the questions in the chat? Both of them?
Did we? Yes.
No.
Did we answer the questions on the chat?
Yes, we got them. Thank you.
Okay. What happens if you want to file a housing lawsuit? Let's say you want to do it now. Some of the reasons why a tenant may file a housing lawsuit against a landlord can be, one, the security deposits, seeking to reduce rent due to poor living conditions, discrimination, injuries or damages to the property caused by a landlord's action. If it's possible, it is possible to file a housing lawsuit by yourself. New York State Court Help, the Small Claims Handbook is a handbook that would basically explain to you the court process on doing that. But however, if it's difficult and it's confusing, of course, I'm going to say do not fill it out without any legal advice or any attorney. Please just contact legal aid for the legal help. Or again, you can use Legal Hand for that because Legal Hand helps with filling out forms.
But and there's a new thing that just became effective at the beginning of this year, that on the court website, they have forms for this. The tenants can actually file an action to ask the court to require their landlord to make repairs. This has been in existence in New York City for years and years and years, but just became effective in upstate on January 1 of 24.
Wow.
And we're seeing that people that are filing them on their own, but on the Office of Court Administration's website, they have it's a petition to ask the court to require repairs or something like that. And it's,
Wow.
you know, it's set up for people to file on their own. So now, before you had to wait, you had to call code and hope that they did something in the way, that you wanted it to happen, in the time frame you wanted it to happen, or you have to wait until the eviction's filed and then you could address it that way. Now you don't have to do that. Now, if your landlord's not making repairs and it's affecting your life, especially if it's affecting your health and safety or that of your children, you can file in court and get a court date and ask the judge to issue a court order requiring the landlord to make the repairs. Now, often it's good to call code, because that, code report can be great evidence in a case like that. That way, it's not just your word against the landlords that, you say this needs to be repaired. The landlord says it doesn't, obviously pictures are good, but a code enforcement report from somebody from code who is, disinterested, not, doesn't have an, isn't on the landlord side of the tenant side, is somebody that courts often will believe more than anybody else. So that's an option too, just if you want to file on your own. We are looking to do these in limited circumstances, but like I said, there are forms on the court, Office of Court Administration website where tenants could do this on their own.
Yeah, and maybe that might even be extended to legal hand. I don't know if they know about that, but they may also
They
be able to
probably
do that.
because the woman that does legal hand, it actually works for us. But that's
Nice.
that's her job, is to work with people from legal hand.
Right.
So she's not the only one.
Yeah,
she-
yeah, but she knows.
Yeah, but she, I would assume she knows about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's the right one.
This is, the next.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it shouldn't, it should be pretty easy to find. It's out there.
Yeah, that's
Now,
good.
I don't know how much courts have seen them because, the law's only been in effect since
Right,
the beginning of the year.
January.
And, sometimes things take some time to gain traction. But it's an option out there and it's great.
That's
It's
good to
been a
know,
long time
yeah.
coming.
Yeah, because I would say if someone's having that, I'm like, you need to call codes now to inspect that, because it's just the code process. But that's even
Yeah,
better.
it can be, and
Yeah.
calling code has its risks,
Yeah, it does, because then we talk.
especially if you're behind in your rent.
Yep.
Because then that can prompt the landlord to file a non-payment eviction and then, your phone call to code puts you in a worse position than you're in now.
Or it can be too that it could be deemed unsafe, unfit. And yeah,
Not always. I mean, maybe
Not-
in Albany
yeah.
they do, not in other places. I know in other places they don't do that.
wow, yeah,
That's surprising to me.
yeah.
Because if something happened to you, then there could be liability there. So I'm surprised that happened.
Ashley, another question from the chat.
Okay.
Can you legally break a lease without being penalized as a tenant if the landlord isn't honoring the terms of their lease by, for example, not making repairs?
But I mean, you can always break your lease, but then the question is what comes next.
Right.
Another thing in the 2019 law that you were talking about earlier.
Are you guys here?
Landlords now have to mitigate their damages. In other words, say you have a lease from October to October and you're sick of the landlord not fixing anything. You don't want to go to court. You just want to get out and it's June,
Right.
for example. The landlord before could just sue you for the balance of the lease, the rent that's due from June to the end of the lease. Now, the landlord has to mitigate that, meaning they have to try to find somebody else to move in to limit the amount of money you would have to pay them. Now, there are certain circumstances you can break your lease. I know there are provisions in New York law in certain circumstances for senior citizens to do so and for domestic violence victims to do so.
And military, if you're about to start the military.
Yeah, so there are limited circumstances, but just generally speaking, you can always just leave, right? But it's what happens next. And the landlord, they have to mitigate their damages and try to rent it to somebody else, which in the affordable housing crisis that we're in now shouldn't be too hard to do, right? There's way more people needing places than there are places.
Right.
So, if a landlord finds somebody July 1st, then really your damages or what they could sue you for should only be limited to that 1 month. So, I mean, that's how it would work. And, and there's other things that come about, even if they get a judgment against you, if you don't have any money that they can collect or assets, then it's not gonna do them any good. It's a piece of paper.
Right.
You know, if you're on Social Security, for example, that's completely exempt. Even they could have a judgment against you for $1 million, but if you're on Social Security, they can't
They
touch it.
can't, yeah,
And if you don't own a car or a house, then it's a piece of paper.
right.
So, that's that question's more loaded than you might think it is. It really, you know, it's the lawyer answer, but it depends. It really does. But it's better now that landlords have to, I mean, from our perspective, that landlords have to actually do something to try to get somebody in the unit to pay rent for the balance of the lease, as opposed to just not doing anything and then being able to sue the tenant and require them to get a judgment for the balance of the
Mhm.
rent from them.
Thank you.
Mhm. Is anyone here within Albany Housing Authority? Nope. On the chat. Just the information, I just wanted to say what Albany Housing Authority. So Albany Housing Authority is a very big landlord. The city does not has any control when it comes down to Albany Housing Authority. But they have their own eviction process too. Some of the examples of the flow chart is in the back and it's on long year packet, but it is a different ball game when it comes down to Albany Housing Authority. One of the main things to just know about it is Albany Housing Court is in the same location as Civil Court here in City Hall. The difference is they might just have their own separate date where they only just trying the folks that are in Albany Housing Authority or who's on a Section 8 voucher, like they usually have a separate day. And their process too, they have a very lengthy process, which is in the back. They try to at least contact the person at least 5 or 6, 7 times, just informing them. And, you know, they also try to work with the tenants as well. And because they don't want also to evict folks out of their units as well, because this is Albany Housing. So if you think about it, like these folks really don't have anything besides Albany Housing at that point in time. So if you want information or you just want some more information about Albany Housing Eviction or your specific case load, 200 Green Street is their resource center. And their staff there is great. So they'll be able to work with your case, your specific case. Another biggie I just want to take with Albany Housing is that, of course, if there is a situation that's going, you have code violations, the rent is going up, please, you have to stay in communication with your caseworker. Please inform your caseworker as to what's happening and they will take it from there. But communication is key. I believe in just all of our housing concerns. If you're falling back on rent to avoid the eviction, just communicate that to your landlord. Try as much as you can. If that means also giving $20 towards the rent balance, you gave $20 is better than not giving anything, and at least shows that you are trying. Okay? Mm-hmm.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something that would be actually tied to eviction,
Okay.
but hopefully this is something that can be brought to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I just would like everyone to marinate on
Mhm.
this. What happens in a situation when one is the do not shelter, do not house list?
Okay.
How is that would not be tied into eviction when it would seem to be an ongoing eviction because you're not able to get in? And I'm just concerned, my concerns are what steps would an individual take or how could you assist them to, get back?
To get back.
Yeah.
Yes. So and I only know this because prior to working here, my background was in the homelessness and I used to oversee a youth shelter. So me just knowing a little bit about the shelter where I do understand if they are giving you a do not, like you can't return back to the shelter, you should definitely be contacting DSS, the caseworker. Or for example, you can contact a person like me, a service advocate that can then connect you to another program that can possibly help. within the homeless pot, because now at that point in time, technically the word is technically you're homeless if you're not in a shelter. Like you're just that's the term that they see it. And the county has a lot of new programs that have just came out like recently within probably a month or two, where they also are helping folks who have that do not shelter.
Yeah, I
Target.
just kind of find it a little bit disturbing. Like,
Yeah.
how does one can get on that list?
Mhm.
And unknowingly, like, you don't even know that months in and months out, you may be told this, you just don't have shelter. You
Yeah.
don't have shelter. But you're not being told until it comes out 5 months down
Yeah.
the road that you've been on this list. And I just think it's inhumane.
Yeah.
You know, homelessness is on the rise.
Yeah, I would think at that point in time, with whatever shelter is giving you all this information, giving you the information about this new cares team that's out there that's dedicated to homelessness. But yes, I agree with you 100%.
But, and I think going back to DSS is the right answer. And also in the winter, you know, if there's code blue
There's
now,
code blue,
so
yeah.
if it's under 30 degrees, then
They can't,
then they
can't
have
do
to,
that,
then
yeah.
they have to shelter you.
Mhm.
At least that's what the law
9
says.
times out of 10, most of the time, if they are telling you that you can't be in that shelter, like you got a ban, is because of maybe something very unsafe. It was a very situation that occurred, and now they're giving you you can't be here restriction. But I know a lot of agencies, I know DSS, I know us, we all are trying to prevent that. Because again, it brings up the conversation. It's just, it doesn't feel humane at all for telling someone they can't be there, regardless even how bad the situation, well, I'm saying regardless how bad the situation may be, they should still be somewhere where someone can stay at, especially if they don't got nowhere else to go. But we could talk more about that after. Yeah.
Ashley, another question from the chat.
Okay.
Does the rule about not being able to collect on Social Security apply to retirement as well, or just SSI, SSD?
Complete all social security across the board is exempt from collection.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, yes.
There's a whole bunch, there's other stuff, you know, like public assistance.
Mm-hmm.
You can't collect from. You can't collect from people's wages to the extent that unless they're above a certain amount.
Right.
And basically you can't, the law doesn't allow you to collect on people in such a way that it's going to make them so they're destitute and they can't
Right.
afford to
Right.
eat and live.
Okay. Thank you.
I think he's talking about social security retirement as opposed to SSI and SSD.
Mhm.
That's the way I heard it.
Yeah, yeah. Libsy, you want to tell us one more time just to make sure we answered that right? The question.
Yeah. Does the rule about not being able to collect on Social Security apply to retirement as well,
Yes.
in addition to SSI, SSD?
Yes.
I mean, social security retirement, not like a private retirement or an IRA or something.
Right.
Yeah, social security retirement, you definitely can. The other retirement, I think you might be able to. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I work at legal aid. We don't usually have clients that have IRAs and annuities and things like that. No, like if you get a court judgment, say you get a court judgment.
You owe
for back rent
$10,000.
for
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a $3,000 judgment because the rent was $1,000 a month. If the person who it's issued against, you know, usually the tenant in that
Mhm.
scenario, if their only income is social security disability or, you know, SSD or SSI or social security, or, you know, widow's benefits, survivor's
survivor
benefits, any
benefits.
kind of social security, they can't,
Touch
they
that.
can't attach or garnish your social security money to collect that judgment. They have to find some other way. And that's a reason sometimes that landlords don't pursue those money judgments, or in evictions, they'll go to court and say, we'll waive the money. We don't care about the money. We just want you out. And that's why at legal aid, we ask clients, what's more important to you? You know, staying, getting time to stay, not having a judgment. And some of them will say, I'm trying to buy a house. I'm trying to buy a car. I can't have a judgment on my credit record.
Right.
So I'll leave, but I don't want that judgment. So really varies, you know, depending on people's circumstance.
If you do run into that situation, I'm always going to tell you to definitely contact Amanda our fair housing officer because she will help with that as well, especially if it was discrimination. Because I think that is a form of discrimination
What is?
if they tried taking the social security or something like that.
Well, I mean, I think if they, the way that would happen, if they try to like attach their bank account, the bank should
Yeah.
see that, there's the only thing coming into that account is social security, and they should not allow it to happen.
Right.
I don't know if it
Right.
always works that way, but
Right.
that's how it would, they should be pretty good about it.
Retirement savings like a 401k, not
Okay. Good.
either.
Yeah, I know for sure about social security, but
And an IRA.
Nice. Okay. But basically what you, yes, is it cannot be touched.
Better.
Yeah. Yeah.
all that stuff.
About it. Personal injury claim.
Right.
Notice.
Yeah. Yeah. And just general tips and reminders. You want to call for assistance as soon as you receive a notice from your landlord. Please do not wait. You can just start calling from their assistance or trying to look for help. Never pay your rent in cash. If you do pay your rent in cash, please get a receipt. I highly suggest also not paying through Zelle, Cash App. I know those are the new forms of rent payment. I know with Cash App you can get a monthly statement, I believe with Zelle as well, but PayPal, you may. But if you are paying, you should be paying probably with a money order with a check. And I only say that because it's just it was standard, it's proof of payment. Just a standard way of doing things. You can go back and reverse the check if you need to. It's just check or money order is always the right thing.
When if you pay cash and don't get a receipt, it's almost like you didn't pay it.
Right. It's like you're giving free money.
Right.
Even with Cash App, even if you are paying with Cash App and you're just giving the money, right, without not putting the note stating that it's rent, it looks like it's cash. Like you're just giving it as a gift. Yes. And there's a way too with some folks where you could arrange that the bank account you could pay it at the bank and they get it from there. I've seen that before with some
Right,
properties.
and that's not a bad way to pay.
Yeah, that's not a
If the
bad way.
landlord has a bank account set up and you go, because the bank will give you a receipt.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, I'm not familiar with Zelle or Cash App so much, but I have Venmo and PayPal, and you can see you can
Yeah.
screenshot, print, because it shows what money's coming
does,
out of
it
your
does.
account.
But
So-
sometimes with Cash App, if you don't put I think where PayPal, Venmo, you have to put what it is. Cash App and Zelle, you don't gotta put anything.
Yeah,
So that's where
I
it
don't know
looks
about
like,
those two. I don't use those two yet.
What month it's
right, like July
And-
rent,
and
yes,
it's- and
something,
it's- And it's
yes.
really important to what we call earmark your rent, because if you are trying to pay August, but you owe from July of 2022, the landlord has the right to apply it back to July and not to this month, unless you say on their for August 2024 rent, you designated it that way, earmarked it, then they have to apply it to that. So, does that make sense? If you don't, if you just do a money order or a check and you don't say what month it's for, they can apply it to back rent, they can apply it to late fees.
Yeah.
They can apply it to utility charges.
Security
They can apply it
deposit,
to
yeah.
damages, they can apply it to anything they want, right,
Yeah.
that you owe. Not necessarily.
What it is, yeah.
I mean, it was the- so I put, I paid $2 million, and he crossed out the months. That I wrote on the check. I don't know.
But that's why I would probably photocopy,
Oh, I took a picture of it before I did.
yeah, or that, yes.
Yeah,
it's still
see?
in the 70s. Yeah, take a picture of it, sorry. They crossed that, you put what month it was for and they crossed it off?
You put July,
See? Well, and you had a picture of it, so
Yeah.
you knew what it looked like when you said it and what you intended to do. So you're covered
Oh.
there.
I always say your case is so interesting.
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff that happens, no doubt about it.
Again, withholding your rent means holding on to your rent. So technically in New York State, you can withhold your rent. You can. But But I always say, if you're gonna withhold the rent, don't spend the rent. A lot of people withhold it and then they spend it. And then you have your back rent that it just keeps building.
Yeah.
Another best way to do that is you can always open an escrow account in your bank account. And what that is just a different bank account, and you can just pay the rent that way. And technically, it's just sitting in that bank account until you can now release it to the landlord. This also helps you in court as well if you are doing it this way, because it at least still shows the judge that the tenant is still paying the rent. It's just that I'm not giving it to the landlord until he fixes like this, that, he fixes it. And of course, do not complete any major repairs to your apartment. So that means do not put a full wall in the living room and making the living room into a 2-bedroom apartment. You don't want to do that unless you own it.
This happens all the time.
You just can't do it. You can't do
Landlord
it.
said that we could stay here as long as we wanted to be here,
Yeah,
so
no.
we remodeled all this stuff, we put thousands of dollars into it.
Yeah. Can't
And
do it.
then, why? If your name isn't on the deed, don't put
Update
money
it.
into it,
Yeah.
because, and there have been landlords, and I did this in Ohio for a long time too, so I'm not just talking about New York, but there are landlords who, if they know you're gonna do that, or like, one of the people who's in construction or whatever, they will let you fix the whole place up, and then as soon as the place is fixed up really nicely, then they'll throw you out.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah.
Or increase your rent. It's not necessary.
I don't know about that. If they increase your rent because of the repairs you did, that would be.
That's weird.
That would be
That's
really
weird,
tough, but usually what they do is they, you got.
put you out, yeah.
You're out. And
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And they
Now,
keep all your
I
stuff.
could raise the rent on I could charge a lot more for it for the next time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen that way, sometimes when tenants are trying to make repairs or improvements, they'll complain about the landlord not fixing stuff, and the landlord will say, well, it's not that I'm not fixing stuff, it's that you tried to do these improvements or repairs and you screwed them all up. And you made it worse, and so it's not my fault that things aren't in good condition, it's your fault that you tried to fix them. So it can spin off in a million directions. When there's humans involved, right? Whenever there's humans
Yeah.
involved, anything can happen.
And just another last thing is just you always just want to keep your receipts, your notices, your emails, your leases. Just always keep a copy of that. Keep a folder and put it in a safe. And just collect your documentation.
And you always should get your lease, because we have, I'd say, half the people that come to us that have leases don't have a copy.
Yeah,
They ask for it, they don't get one. I mean, you should try to get one right at the beginning.
yeah, when you get it.
Because if you try to get it when problems have started or are going on, then it's harder to get. So.
What's on the screen is just your legal, oh, go ahead.
One more question before moving on from that last slide. What are the legal grounds under which you can withhold rent?
Usually it's for the landlord not making repairs. I don't,
Yeah.
you can withhold rent, but I don't usually advise people to do that. It's
Major repairs, like major stuff.
yeah, I mean, I think it has to be something that affects your health and safety. I mean, it can't be that there's a hole in the screen, or it has to be something that you would think, if you call code enforcement and they come out, they're gonna write up a report
Right.
and they're gonna cite the landlord
Right.
for it. The problem with it though is that, if you withhold the rent, you have to hold on to it. Like you said earlier,
Can't spend
if you
it.
spend it, then what happens if the landlord takes you to court and you say, yeah, the reason I didn't pay the rent is there was all these problems. Then the court makes a determination as to what you owe. Because usually they don't say you don't owe anything,
Yeah,
unless it's been condemned, then arguably they could.
right.
And then you have to either pay the money or you're evicted.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you could withhold it and you hold on to it, it can be an effective way of forcing the landlord's hand to fix things. But you better hold on to it.
But you
because
gotta
if
hold
don't
on
have
to it.
And then you go to court, and even if you convince the judge that
Still
you get a
bad.
50% reduction, you still got to pay the other 50.
Still got pain.
So, and if you don't, then they issue a warrant. So.
It's the legal term if you want to ask for your rent to be lowered,
Abatement.
abatements.
Abatement.
You can also ask for that too. But I think with that too, you gotta prove a lot that.
Well, we have to prove that, yeah, that the repairs weren't made.
Yeah.
And that you notified the landlord, and that the repairs were not caused by. A lot of times what happens in those situations, the landlords will either say, they didn't tell me, or they told me and we sent people over to fix it and they wouldn't let them in.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's true, and I suspect sometimes it's not, but that's usually what they say.
You have another question?
Yes. Are there any rules for how much a landlord can increase the rent during a lease renewal?
There is, and I think it's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
There is something that, and I think it's 5%.
It's 5, yeah.
There's, Ashley said earlier about when they're trying to terminate when it's the end of your lease and they don't want to renew it, or they're trying to terminate a month-to-month tenancy, it's 30 days if you're there less than a year, 60
90.
between 1 and 2 years, and 90 for more than 2. That applies to rent increases. So if you've been there for 2 years and they want to increase your rent, they gotta give you 90-day notice.
Yeah, yep.
And that is under the HSTPA, so that's probably what you were talking about. So there are limitations. I think that the limitation there is 5%.
It's 5. I believe it
it's
is 5. Mm-hmm. Or the fair market, it's like the market rate of that area. Who would know that for sure is my colleague Amanda. Just because the fair housing stuff, she would know that. And if you would like that information, we can always get that to you as well. She has her own page on our website as well for the fair housing office. So there's a lot of information. I believe this information as well might just be on that on her page. Yeah.
But see,
But,
it used to be when you didn't want to renew a lease,
we just go.
it just expired and then you could file in court. You'd have to give any notice at all. I remember when I first came here, I lost a case like that.
Really?
Exact point. Yeah, a long time ago,
Wow.
out in Amsterdam, when I was out there probably 15 years ago.
Wow.
And you could increase the rent too, if the lease expires and you say,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna do a new lease, but now it's
Yeah.
gonna be
This
2,000 a
is where you can
month.
see it,
And
yeah.
the tenant could either say, all right, I'm out, or sign the
Oh,
lease.
yeah.
Now they have to give notice.
Yep.
Um,
I was gonna say that and then all this applies, right? Like a landlord cannot increase your rent during an active lease. So let's say if you had the active lease right now and it's a year lease and now you're getting month 3, you're getting a notification that now the rent is this amount, like that's illegal. The only time that they can increase the rent is at the end of your lease. So at the end of that term,
It's 5%.
5%.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
They have to let you stay. They can't just say you're out as long as you got no rent
Yes,
and you're not a nuisance.
yes.
Under the good cause law
Yeah.
in Albany, yeah, I mean, that's not the case anywhere else around here.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the other cities around here have opted into good cause. Well, sure,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about around here.
Yeah.
I don't mean New York City. So that's a whole different world for me. I'm
Mhm.
talking about Troy, Schenectady, Colony, Guilderland, all those places.
But all of New York has eviction.
Yes.
Yes,
That's all.
that's New York State, yes.
Yeah, and retaliatory eviction is a hard defense because all the landlord has to prove is a non-retaliatory reason for eviction, and they win.
Yeah, but I pay my rent.
Well, yeah, but there could be other reasons too. It's not retaliatory. I want to rent it to my daughter. My daughter wants to live there. I don't want to rent it anymore.
Mhm.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about your situation. I'm talking generally.
Mhm.
Retaliatory eviction is hard to win. If you're current in your rent, it's a lot easier. Because,
Yeah.
what happens is you go in and say you prove retaliation, and then the burden shifts to the landlord to show it was a retaliation. And they say it wasn't because you called code, it was because you overacted. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about your.
Yeah, we can talk
I don't
later
know
about
your-
that.
I don't know what that
We can
is.
talk. That's a codes thing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the classic retaliatory eviction case. You call code and then the next week you get an eviction.
That's
But it's
what
hard
that
to
is.
win. It's hard to win on retaliatory, not impossible, but it's hard.
It's a little bit
It's
more
hard because the landlord, if they come up with any legitimate reason at all, that's not retaliation, the tenant loses. So,
I know you had a question. Yes.
If you live like this senior citizen complex and they have the
every year, the year that they have a raise in your income. If it was something that brought you over and the person received Section 8, would that be a good call to somebody up if you received an upgrade in the year when you had a raise in your SSI check or something, and it brought you over the amount of what?
Yes.
you were owed?
Yes, it's if dealing with Albany Housing Authority and their vouchers, yes, I believe, yes, I've seen that in the past. To get you the actual answer, this is why I would say definitely reach out to the caseworker or a staff member out of the Section 8 team or just voucher team to help explain that.
Well,
Just
there- you
because,
know,
just
there's-
because they're just a whole different entity and they have a whole different process. with
Yeah,
it.
there's subsidized,
Yeah.
there's senior housing and subsidized housing. It has nothing to do with Albany housing.
No.
though. So
Yeah.
there's, in public and subsidized housing, good cause was already required as a matter of federal law forever. So the good cause that we're talking about applies to private situations.
Yeah, it doesn't, it wouldn't apply.
Any sort of, I can't think of any sort of public or subsidized housing that wouldn't require good cause to evict somebody, because, there's, privately owned housing that's like Capitol Green on Central Avenue.
Mhm.
Nothing to do with the housing authority,
No.
it's privately owned, but it's subsidized, so you have to have good cause.
Right.
All the public housing owned by the housing authority, there's tax credit property, which is actually the most common type of subsidized housing in New York State, requires good cause.
Mhm.
The thing is, as we said earlier, you gotta show up and argue that. Because judges are not gonna raise that on their own generally, because they're supposed to be objective and impartial. They're not supposed to do anything in favor of either side. So if your table's empty, there's nobody talking and you're not telling the judge what they need to hear about. Hey, what about this? So it's important to go. It's probably the most important thing I actually said was to,
Just go.
call somebody right away.
Call somebody.
Make sure you show up if you've got court. Don't throw anything away.
Yes,
And you don't have to move just because the 14th.
Yes,
or
don't
just because the
move,
notice
right.
is up.
right.
They
right.
still have to take you to court and get a warrant and the sheriff coming the second time, that's what you have. Before that, you don't.
For our last slide, these are just your legal resources here listed. So besides, city court, you got New York, court help, legal aid, of course, that where we can, legal aid can always help. United Tenants also helps with advocacy and assistance. Legal Hand is also that new service that you can text, call, email. They help folks in Albany and Schenectady counties. They are looking to expand more, but those are the two counties they're starting with. And then I just included Family Legal Care, and Family Legal Care is almost the same thing as Legal Hand, but they help with New York State family court stuff. So child support, visitations, anything within just family court. That service provider can help you as far as filling out any forms that need to be filled out and just the legal support if someone is experiencing just a case within family court.
And one thing I'll say at legal aid, I have to say this every time, is that we can't help everybody who calls us. People go to DSS, it's an entitlement program. If you meet the eligibility requirements, you get the benefit. That's not how we work. We're not an entitlement program. You have to be financially eligible. There can't be a conflict of interest. And then even if you get past that, you might only get advice because we don't have enough lawyers. I mean, I used to have 8 or 10 lawyers, and we have 2 different housing units for different areas. And I had 8 or 10 in mine. Now I have 2, and I've got a third one coming. And I'm excited about 3 lawyers, which is sad. Because like I said, I used to have a whole hallway full of lawyers that just defended evictions in the 5 counties that our Albany office covers. Now, for the longest time, I had 1. Now I have 2. Next month, at the end, I'll have 3. So the demand for our services way exceeds our ability to respond to it. We do give people advice if they're eligible, at least. But just because you get you're getting eviction papers and you call legal aid does not mean you're automatically going to get a lawyer.
Right.
We can't help everybody.
Right.
And actually, we usually prioritize the public and subsidized housing evictions especially now, because there are a lot of people who live in public and subsidized housing, or voucher termination. So if they don't live there, considering the explosion in rents, they can't live anywhere. I mean, we have clients that if you're getting, SSD 1,300 a month, you can pay a 1/3 of that in public or subsidized housing. But even for a 1-bedroom, if you go on the private market, what's a 1-bedroom in Albany? 1,200, right? Something like that. So we prioritize public and subsidized housing cases because they're so important for low income people, because some of them can only afford to live there, nowhere else. We do take some private evictions, a little more now because we have 2 lawyers, and a little more in a few months when we get the 3rd lawyer. But we used to be able to do a lot more, and we can't now because we hire law graduates that aren't licensed yet. We hire paralegals. We try to do all these things because we can't get lawyers to apply to work for us. We've raised our salaries. We've done all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I don't want to cry too much about that, but just know that if you call legal aid, it's not automatic that someone's going to go to court with you, because we aren't staffed that way. I wish we were. Really do wish we were, but we're not.
Yeah, it's just shortage everywhere, unfortunately. You can see it.
It's
But you
true.
can- you can-
I don't know where
yeah.
everybody was working before COVID and working now. I don't know where, I don't know what happened to them. Yes. It depends, in an eviction? I mean, I don't have that off the top of my head. I mean, basically, we just have a chart from the federal government. And it also depends too, because we have different grants now. Now, the grant that we have now that funds our legal assistance in evictions, you can make a lot more. I think I looked it up, like a family of 2 can make up to 75 grand a year
Oh, wow.
for legal assistance. So it's a lot better. That's 80% of the area median income. We used to go by 30%. And we have a financial assistance program that's ending next month, and that's 30% of AMI. That's like 2-person household can make like 26, 28 grand. So it's a huge difference. So that's what I would say. So, but that's what we just have a chart that people can look at, and it's based on household size and gross income.
What other counties besides Albany do you legal aid help?
Well, we cover from the Catskills to Canada because we have 6 different offices, but in the Albany office, Albany, Schenectady, Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene. And we really haven't been doing a lot in Columbia, Greene, because we're not enough lawyers, and we get way more calls from Albany, Schenectady, and Rensselaer than we do from Columbia, Greene. There's way more people, right? So,
Right.
we're hoping obviously that we can, expand if we can hire more lawyers. So if you know anybody who's like in law school or out of law school, wants to do public good, tell them to apply because we need lawyers. I don't say desperately, but badly. I'll
Yeah.
say.
2 other places too, and that I forgot to mention that I just thought about. We do have Albany Law School. They have a clinic as well that people can get help from, and Legal Project. There's another agency.
Yeah, and I don't think they do evictions.
They don't do eviction, but they might
They do
give some.
stuff,
Yeah,
foreclosures.
yeah.
And United Tenants, I mean, we
Yes,
couldn't understand.
United Tenants.
They have people that can go to court,
Yes.
and they're not lawyers, but they're knowledgeable. They're
Yes.
tenant advocates, they're knowledgeable, they know what's going on, and they can, I think, probably more often send people to court than we can, because they
Yes.
have more, I think they have
a
more
person in
staff. They're
court.
not lawyers, but they're people who are familiar with the process and who can go and help navigate it.
United Tenants, they have Krista, if you haven't seen it, our session in December. Goes up to the podium with the tenants. I've seen that in action.
Yeah, they're a great organization.
Yeah,
They help a
yeah.
lot of people.
We just need 5 of them.
Right. Yeah, the labor shortage and the affordable housing crisis and the explosion in rents are all bad things happening at the same time, unfortunately.
Well, that concludes our session. The only other slide is basically our information where you can reach us. Again, you can always contact me. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. My office is physically at 200 Harry Johnson, which is the Stewart's on Harry Johnson. We're literally the brick building right next to it. You can always come and see us. That is my phone number. And my email. Again, I always say the best way to contact me is the email, just because I see it right on my watch when I'm moving around. And plus I'm able to just respond fast to through the email, but you can always call. My business cards are in the back, which also have my cell phone number. And that number you can always text or FaceTime if you need to. You can. Just another way to get to
And
me.
my individual name wasn't up there because you have to go through our intake process. If anybody calls my desk, I just have to say, call this number anyway, and it just slows it down. So
Mhm.
that's why my information isn't up there, because people have to go through intake
Yes.
before they can. And I'm a supervisor at Legal Aid. I don't handle cases directly myself. I supervise and assist others in doing so. Holdover? Yeah, a holdover is basically anything that's filed that's not a non-payment. Usually it's either your lease is expired, whether it was a written lease or a month-to-month tenancy, or the landlord is evicting you because they're claiming that you're violating the lease somehow, and they want you out. Classic example is, got a lease that says no pets, and you got a dog in there. Or it says no smoking, and people are complaining you're smoking in there. Or disturbing, you're playing your stereo full blast 3 a.m. People are trying to sleep, have to go to work the next day. They complain to the landlord. That kind of, any kind of lease violation like that. Yes, so that's it. So it's either the lease expired, whether it's month to month or written lease, that's what we call a no cause holdover. Which you can't do now in Albany unless you have good cause. That's what, those are the evictions that good cause prevents. Just evictions because the lease expired. And then there's the lease violation. Or there are also a few other ones that are like, if the landlord claims you're a squatter or a licensee, those are fairly rare, but licensees are like people who you gave permission to stay, but now you revoked it. Boyfriend, girlfriend situation, they break up, boyfriend, girlfriend, one of them owns the house. They want the other one to leave. That's a licensee holdover. And that's weird and different because you only have to give 10 days notice. Pretty rare though. I mean, and squatters, same thing, 10 days notice. Although people are called squatters way more than they actually are squatters. We've seen tenants and actually cities who are trying to evict people saying they're squatters, and they come in and they're like, I've got a lease. I've been living here for a year. There's some sort of
It's like something.
there's some sort of stigma about being called a squatter. It makes people that are trying to throw people out, makes them happy to be able to call someone a squatter. I guess it's like a dirty word or something. So that's it. So mostly it's the lease expired, or you're violating your lease, I want you out. Those are holdovers.
Does anyone on Zoom have any more questions?
I think we're all set over here.